Never would I have imagined my little farm would become a battleground when my HOA tried to designate it as a public zoo for locals to enjoy freely, but they knew I managed every food supply under control. Grocery store and restaurant, they depended on what would occur throughout there. Found their morning coffee, and popular dining establishments couldn't operate without the very farm they were trying to eliminate. Comments below where you're watching from. I stood frozen in my doorway while 5 strangers meander about through my vegetable garden, picking my tomatoes and taking photos beside my chicken coop. A little boy pointed at my prize rooster while his mother snapped photographs on her phone. None of them had sought permission to be on my land. Reason me, I called out, trying to keep my voice friendly. This is private property. The woman looked up confused, but the sign says this is the Willow Creek Estates communal farm experience, open to all residents. What sign? My stomach plummeted as I rushed to the edge of my property. Proper there it stood, a freshly placed wooden placard with fancy lettering, Willow Creek Community Farm and Zoo, all residents welcome daily 9 to 5. I hadn't put it there. Someone had tagged my private 5-acre farm as public property. Overnight I had acquired this place just 3 months ago. My dream, after 15 years of saving every dime from my job as an agricultural scientist. The real estate salesperson had promised me the HOA rules permitted for elegant landscaping and sustainable living methods. Nobody mentioned anything about my land establishing a petting zoo for boar suburbanites. The family looked ashamed as I explained there must be a mistake. They apologized and departed, but just before the mother spoke, Diane from the HOA board directly told us about this place at the community meeting yesterday. She mentioned you were delighted to share your farm with everyone. Diane Thompson, we'd met briefly when I moved in. She'd dyed my shifting crates of Jing items with apparent dislike and mentioned that she hoped I wouldn't destroy the neighborhood aesthetic. I spent the afternoon checking my property deed and docs. Nothing provided them the right to declare my farm a public space. I removed the placard and carried it inside. As evidence, that evening my doorbell rang. Diane stood there in a clean jeans suit, immaculate makeup, and a grin that didn't reach her eyes. Behind her were 2 other folks I recognized from the welcome packet as HOA board members. We noticed you deleted our community sign, Diane said without greeting the sign. Improperly classified my private property as public place. I said calmly I never agreed to that. Diane's smile tightened. When you purchased in Willow Creek, you agreed to all HOA covenant. Section 12.3 plainly explains that unique landscape characteristics visible from communal places can be categorized as community enhancement. Owns your livestock and crops qualify. The older man behind her nodded. I'm Malcolm Jenkins, her president. We've received complaints regarding unattractive constructions and livestock odors. Identifying this as a community educational space actually helps you avoid fines. I took a deep breath. First, my chicks are clean and legal under county regulations. Second, nothing in the HOA documents allows you to grant public access to private property without owner consent. I'll be pleased to show you the related property laws. Diane's smile disappeared entirely. We've made our decision. The sign gets back up tomorrow. Otherwise you'll face daily fines of $200 for each offense we've documented. She handed me a packet filled with paperwork. Before I could react, she said, oh, and we've already promoted the farm experience in the neighborhood newsletter. 40 households have joined up. Hopefully excursions this weekend don't disappoint the children. They departed before I could. Further deeper into the folder were photographs of my property with circles around my chicken coop, vegetable beds, rainwater collection system, and compost bins. Each was classified as a violation with related HOA rules that had been stretched beyond recognition to apply to my farm. I remained up past midnight reading my property deed, county rules, and bylaws. What I discovered gave me hope. Diane had overstepped, but fighting back would require careful preparation. The next morning automobiles began arriving about 9 a.m. Sharp families with delighted youngsters walked right up my driveway as if they own the spot. The sign had reappeared overnight now with a laminated schedule of agricultural experience hours. A woman with twins approached me as I stood watching in astonishment. Are you the farmer the newsletter said you'd show the youngsters how to collect eggs and choose vegetables? For a modest donation price, I'm sorry, but there's been a misunderstanding. I said this is my private home, not a public farm. Her face fallen, but we have paid the HOA activity charge. Diane received $15 from each family for the agricultural experience. My blood boiled. Diane was charging people to intrude on my property. I swiftly did the math. 40 families at $15 each was $600 the HOA was collecting without my knowledge or consent. I invited the woman inside and showed her my property. Docs, I'm going to resolve this with the HOA, but you should ask for your money back. That won't be simple, she sighed. Diane controls the board like her personal kingdom. Most people are too terrified to challenge her. As she went, I put up my own sign, private property, and yes, trespassing. Tore information wrongly published, yet people kept coming. Perplexed and disappointed, some were understanding, but some were enraged that I was disrupting their weekend plans. One individual threatened to denounce me to the HOA, ironically ignorant that they were the source of the problem. That afternoon, I drove around the neighborhood taking images of Diane's house and other board members' properties. I observed at least several offenses more serious than my farm, from forbidden paint colors to forbidden structures. Nold was power, and I needed all the ammunition I could gather. As I turned back into my driveway, Diane was waiting, arms crossed behind her. Malcolm and 2 maintenance workers were restoring the communal farm sign. Remove that sign from my property. So I responded firmly, this isn't simply your property anymore. Diane grinned coldly. The HOA has voted to declare this area a community resource. Section 15.2 gives us that authority. I've read Section 15.2. I countered it pertains exclusively to common spaces and requires owner consent. We have community needs that supersede your own preferences, Malcolm added. Besides, this may be fantastic PR for whatever tiny hobby farm you're jogging. Diane stepped closer. The sign stays, the tours continue, fight us, and we'll make your life exceedingly difficult. I pushed out 3 homeowners who didn't suit our community standards. As they walked away, I knew this wasn't just concerning property rights or farming. This was about power and control. Diane had no idea who she was fooling with, or that I contained a secret that would astonish everyone in Willow Creek Estates. What would occurred when I revealed that their precious neighborhood couldn't function without my farm tomorrow would bring a surprise Diane never anticipated coming. Early Saturday morning, I drove to Wilson's Market, the primary food shop serving Willow Creek Estates. Mr. Wilson himself was organizing a showcase of fresh produce. As I came, there's my star supplier, he yelled out gleefully. Your rainbow carrots sold out in 2 hours yesterday. When can I acquire more? I grinned, noting 2 ladies from the HOA board selecting vegetables. Clothes they didn't know I could hear them. These tomatoes are fantastic, one remarked. I've never tasted something this fresh from a supermarket store. Little did they realize they were praising my ugly farm's harvest. Mr. Wilson, I stated loudly enough for them to hear, I may have problems meeting our contract next month. Some guys from Willow Creek are causing problems with my farm. The woman froze, turning slowly in my direction. Mr. Wilson frowned. That would be horrible. Your produce is why customers pick us over the superstore on Main Street. My business would suffer without your deliveries. I nodded wildly. I'd hate to let you down, but they're alleging my farm breaches rules. They've even started bringing tour groups onto my private property without permission. By now the board members were listening freely, recognition dawning on their faces. Wait, one woman approached cautiously. Are you claiming you grow the produce for Wilson's? I supply roughly 60% of their fresh vegetables, I confirmed, plus the herbs and specialty at things 4 Harvest Table Restaurant and the organic section at Morton's Grocery. The women exchanged worried glances. Harvest Table was the upscale eatery where the HOA attended their regular dinner meetings. Morton brought groceries to half the neighborhood. I had no idea. The second woman responded. Diane informed us your farm was an ire, pulling down property values. Curious, did Diane also state she's collecting $15 per family for unauthorized tour of my property? I asked. Their startled expressions told me everything. They hurried out, already on their phones. Back home I found another tour group being escorted around my property by a teenage girl I'd never seen before. She was pointing at my chicken coop, assuring tourists that the farm lady will let you hold the hens for an extra $5. Absolutely not, I interrupted. These Animals are not play objects and no one has authorization to be here. The girl appeared confused, but Mrs. Thompson hired me to conduct tours while she's at her salon appointment. She handed me this badge and everything. She showed me an official appearing ID card that read Willow Creek Estates Community Guide. I took images of the badge and asked the group to depart, explaining the situation. Majority were understanding, though disappointed one elderly guy lingered behind. I'm Gerald Matthews, he introduced himself. Resided here 30 years since before the development expanded. Been watching this circumstance with curiosity. Good to greet you. While I wish it were under better situations, I replied. Gerald leaned on his cane. You should know Diane and her husband Michael have been seizing power in this community for years. They're aiming to develop the green space behind your property for condominiums. Your farm doesn't meet their vision. This new information snapped into place. My property bordering the last developed woodland in the region. If they could force me out, they'd have a greater connection. Plot for development. Thank you for informing me, I said. Do others know about these ideas? Most persons are too busy to pay attention. Gerald S. They just write their HOA checks and expect to avoid Diane's rage. After Gerald departed, I drove to the county records office to research property maps and zoning regulations. What I noticed was gold. The entire area surrounding my farm was recognized as a protected agricultural heritage zone because to its past as farmland, any development would require specific permits and public hearings. That evening, once I arrived home, I saw Diane and Michael supervising workmen installing permanent navigation marks over my front field. Stop instantly, I called out. You have no right to build anything on my property. Michael Thompson approached his developer's grin fiercely. In situ, we're merely implementing some simple pathways to make the community farm experience safer for visitors. The board authorized the expenditure yesterday. I never consented to this, I stated strongly. Delete these marks ASAP or I'll report this as illegal trespassing and destruction of property. Diane accompanied her husband. Don't be difficult, this could benefit everyone. A little garden can be informative for the community and we'll feature it in our neighborhood brochure. This small garden supplies majority of the fresh produce to companies in this neighborhood, I advised them. Adding your favorite restaurants. Michael chuckled dismissively. You're exaggerating. Our eateries get delivery from key providers. I pulled out my phone and showed them my contracts with local businesses. Checked the names: Wilson's Market, Harvest Table, Morton's Groceries, Fresh Start Cafe. I supply them all. The color faded from Diane's face. That's impossible. Those are the finest food places in the area. I'm an agricultural scientist with 15 years of expertise developing high-yield organic growing methods. Explanation: why do you think my vegetables look so nice? It's not a hobby, it's my business. Michael's businessman impulses kicked in. Wait, so you're running a business farm in a residential area? That's obviously against HOA regulations. Well, actually it's not, I countered, showing them county docs. This entire development sits on what's legally classified as a protected agricultural heritage zone. My farm is clearly permitted under both county restrictions and your own HOA founding docs. What founding documents? Diane snapped. The original HOA covenant from when Willow Creek was established. I smiling. Gerald Matthews pointed me in the correct direction. Did you know he kept copy of everything when he was on the original board 30 years ago? Michael emotion toughened. The antique manuscripts are superseded by our current rules, not pursuant to county legislation, I replied, and obviously not according to the state agricultural protection statutes that prevent HOAs from restricting pre-existing agricultural usage. Diane's phone rang after a brief talk. She turned to Michael, whispering urgently. His expression indicated increased concern. Is anything wrong? I inquired innocently. Harvest Table just called, Diane stated stiffly. They stated its manufactured delivery was cancelled because of some problem with their supplier. How unfortunate, I answered. I heard they're absolutely booked this weekend. Imagine disappointed all those clients with a limited menu. Michael assessed me with new respect and concern. Perhaps we've gotten off on the wrong foot. Let's debate this like sensible people. I'm always reasonable, I said, starting with you remove these markings and that sign, then withdrawing the communal farm experience from your newsletter using a comprehensive explanation and reimbursement to everyone. Person paid, and in return Michael requested. Cautiously, I'll consider resuming deliveries to companies in the area, including your restaurant, I answered, but foremost we need to be clear about borders, both property and authority. Once the workers began dismantling the markers, I spotted HOA board members and neighbors gathering at the border of my property, observing with interest. Word was spreading swiftly. What Diane and Michael didn't know was that I invited the local newspaper to write a feature on urban agricultural success stories tomorrow. Their reporter was eager to hear about community concerns facing small-scale agriculture. How would the Thompsons respond when their HOA tactics made front page news? I woke up to a loud banging outside my bedroom window. My heart jumped when I peeked through the curtains. 4 soldiers in green uniforms were banging a large wooden sign into my front yard. The sign read Willow Creek Estates Community Farm and Zoo, open daily 9 o'clock to 5 p.m. I ran outdoors, still wearing my pajamas, not even stopping to put on shoes. The moist grass poked my bare feet as I ran for them. Hey, halt that right now, this is my private property, I yelled, flailing my arms. The workers stared at each other uneasily. One of them, a younger man with a red cap, spoke up. Sorry ma'am, we're just following directions from the HOA board. I don't care whose commands they are, this is my land, you can't put signs on it without my consent. The oldest worker shrugged. You'll have to take it up with Miss Thompson, we just do what we're taught. They completed putting the sign and left. I tried to pull it out myself, but they had cemented it hard into the ground. My phone rang. It was my pal Tyler from the neighborhood hardware shop. Hey, just wanted to warn you, Diane's been telling everyone in town that your farm is now open to the public. She's handing out flyers at the coffee shop. My stomach sunk. She's what? Before I could even changing out of my pajamas, automobiles started coming into my driveway. First one, then 3, then a whole line reaching down the road. Family piled out with picnic baskets and cameras. Some held empty containers like they were going berries. Welcome, welcome to the farm, a woman cried out joyfully, waving at me as her 3 kids ran right at my chicken coop. Forgive me, I stated, attempting to sound calm, though my heart was racing. This is not a public farm, this is my private home. The woman looked confused. However, the newsletter said, and there's a sign right there, I didn't allow any of that, I explained. By noon my yard was crowded with strangers. Children squeezed their faces against my windows. A group of youngsters were chasing my poultry. I discovered a lady picking my prize squash and filling a large basket. Those are not free for the taking, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Those are my crops, things I sell to local companies. She looked at me like I was insane. Diane said, this is a community source now. It was in the email update. I tried contacting Malcolm Jenkins, the HOA president, 6 times. He didn't answer. I left mails explaining the circumstance, my voice getting more urgent each time. At 3 o'clock p.m., found 2 boys climbing my apple trees, breaking branches when I asked them to cease. Their mother snapped, the sign says this is a communal farm. That means these are community trees. By evening my gorgeous farm was trampled, vegetable beds damaged, half my ripe produced stolen. My chicks were so stressed they had buried under the coop and halted laying. I changed into my nicest outfit, clean jeans, a pressed button-up shirt. With my best boots I gathered all my crucial papers, property deed, agriculture permits, business licenses, with property surveys that clearly indicated my bounds. I put them in a binder and drove to the HOA meeting at the community center. The room was filled. When I arrived, Malcolm sat at the front table with 4 other board members, includes Diane, who sported a smug smile. When she saw me, our community farmer has arrived, she declared. We were just discussing the success of our new attraction. I raised my hand to speak. Malcolm nodded. I'd like to discuss the board about the criminal trespassing you've encouraged on my private property, I said, simply holding up my folder of papers. Diane quickly interrupted. Point of order, we need to follow the agenda. Malcolm agreed. Let's conclude our scheduled business first for the next hour. I sat furious as they chatted sidewalk repairs and community pool rules. Individuals in the audience kept turning to look at me, some smile, others whispering. I heard phrases like troublemaker and not a team player. Finally Malcolm announced, now we'll discuss the community farm initiative. Diane stood forward with a bright poster, providing a map of my property with walking pathways drawn all over it. Everyone Adores our new community attraction, she proclaimed with a big smile. We've received fantastic reviews on the educational chances for youngsters. The board has voted to install permanent public paths in the eastern portion next month to increase access. Stunned whispers circulated through the room. Some folks nodded in approval, not understanding they were talking about stealing bits of my own property. I stood up, grasping my documents closely. Before you proceed with your ideas, I remarked, keeping my voice calm and clear, you should know whose produce you've been enjoying at Greenleaf Market, Harvest Table Restaurant, and Morton's Grocery. The room fell utterly silent. I pulled out my business contracts and held them up. These are my supply deals with every significant food business in this town. The organic tomatoes you adore at Morton's, the unique salad greens at Harvest Table Restaurant, I grow those. The fresh herbs and vegetables at Green Leaf Market come from my farm also. I glanced directly at Diane. If my farm operation is disrupted or destroyed by trespassers that you're allowing onto my land, none of these enterprises will have the fresh local produce they depend on. I placed my contracts on the table in front of Malcolm. Would you like to see what happens to your favorite eateries when their food supply abruptly gone? Malcolm's mouth hung open as he glanced at my business contracts. The room buzzed with shocked whispers. Several individuals stood up to get a better look at the documents I'd placed on the table. Is this some form of joke? Diane snapped, her cheeks going red. You expect us to believe you're the supplier for all these businesses? The back door opened and in walked Sam Garcia, the owner of Green Leaf Market. He hadn't attended a HOA meeting in years. It's true, Sam declared, walking to the front of the room. When that farm quits producing, my store loses 60% of its delicious produce. No other local source can match the quality or quantity. Diane crossed her arms. Well, we can just get produce transported in from elsewhere. Jessica Martinez from Morton's Groceries stood up from her seat in the third row. At triple the cost with half the freshness our customers specifically ask for. The local organic edgies, they know the difference. Malcolm cleared his throat nervously. I'm sure we can locate a reasonable answer. I've already found one, I interrupted, grabbing another paper from my folder. This is a cease and desist letter from my lawyer. The sign comes down tomorrow. Anyone entering my property without authorization will be trespassing. Any HOA member who encouraging trespassing will be named in my lawsuit. She's bluffing, Dien. We have authority under the HOA bylaws to show me exactly where in the bylaws it states you can seize private property and open it to the public, I challenged. Malcolm flipped rapidly through his copy of the HOA bylaws. There's a clause regarding community aesthetics that doesn't give you the right to steal my land or kill my business, I said firmly. If I have to shut down because of with harassment, your food prices will double. Midnight night, the nearest equivalent organic farm is over 100 m away. Malcolm's cheeks grew very red. This sounds like blackmail. This is company, I informed him. I'm merely educating everyone how their actions affect our whole community. Diane jumped to her feet, her voice harsh and piercing. She's threatening us. This is exactly why we need to regulate this IRA. Murmur rippled through the throng. People gazed at each other, clearly uncomfortable. Suddenly Jacob Reynolds rose up. I recognized him as the owner of Sunshine Bakery, the most popular brunch restaurant in town. I need to speak. Jacob claimed that farm supplies all the unique wheat for my artisan breads. Nobody else grows the heritage varieties I need. Without that supply, I'd have to entirely modify my menu. Emma Kwan, whose catering business handled most local events, lifted her hand. My entire herb selection originates from that farm. My clients specifically seek them fresh flavors. If that supply disappeared, my business would suffer greatly. One by one, other business owners in the room spoke up. The coffee shop that utilized my berries in their popular muffins, the school who bought my vegetables for their cafeteria, the tiny health food retailer that relies on my seasonal produce. Diane's face grew darker with each testimony. This is insane. We're talking about suitable community standards, not tomatoes. We're talking about our local economy, answered Sam from Green Leaf Market. That farm employs 4 part-time workers from our community too. Are you planning to locate them new jobs? People began arguing loudly. Some defended Diane, stating property values were most crucial. Others supported me, talking about food quality and local enterprises. Malcolm banged his gavel. Repeatedly order we need order Diane. Leaned over and whispered something in his ear. He nodded and cleared his throat. The board will need to reconsider this matter in light of this fresh information. In the interim we'll temporarily suspend the community farm initiative. Until that's not good enough, interrupted Jessica from Morton's Grocery. We need a promise that our provider won't be harassed anymore. Malcolm looked agitated. We can't just abandon HOA standards completely. The discussion grew heated again. Outside thunder boomed. We'd been so focused on the argument that nobody had spotted the storm rolling in. Rain began beating against the windows. Perhaps we should organize a committee to assess the situation, Malcolm proposed. Weekly perfect. Diane jumped in. I'll chair the committee. And certainly not. Sam interrupted. You've showed evident bias against the farm. Any committee needs to be balanced. Lightning flashed, followed by a thunderous boom of thunder. The lights flashed once, twice, then went completely dark. People gasped. Someone screamed. Cell phone flashlights clicked on, creating eerie shadows around the meeting. Adjourned due to weather. Malcolm called out, we'll reschedule to continue this debate. As people grabbed their items in the dim light, I felt a gentle touch on my shoulder. I turned to see Eleanor Williams, the quiet, elderly woman who lives 3 doors down from me. Her face appeared eerie in the blue glow of someone's phone light. Don't leave yet, she muttered, her wrinkled hand grasping my arm with amazing strength. Met me tomorrow at sunrise at the big oak tree on your property boundary. Why, what do you know about this? I asked, coming closer. Eleanor's eyes moved toward Diane, who was hunched with Malcolm in the corner. You're not the first farmer they've trying to shove out, she muttered. I have papers you need to see, things they don't want someone to find before I could ask more questions. Eleanor shuffled away, slipping into the crowd heading toward the exit. Outdoors rain poured down in sheets. People ran to their cars holding coats over their heads through the rain. I observed Diane talking with Malcolm under the building's overhang. When she saw me looking, she pointed in my direction, her face twisted with anger. What truths was Eleanor about to reveal? Something could tilt this contest in my favor. You need to see anything immediately. Away, Eleanor whispered as we met at my fence line before sunrise. Her voice shook with eagerness that made my skin prickle. Despite her 80 years and damaged hips, she went fast through the morning mist, engulfing my property. I couldn't sleep after what happened at the meeting, Elin stated, holding an old leather folio to her chest. Those vultures tried the same prank 30 years ago with my husband's farm. My heart skipped. You had a farm here? Eleanor nodded, pointing across the sweeping countryside. Everything, this every inch where those posh homes currently sit, was our family farmland for 3 generations. 40 gorgeous acres of maize, tomatoes, and the finest strawberries you ever tasted. We reached a big oak tree near my eastern border. Eleanor touched its bark tenderly. My hubby proposed under this tree. It's the only thing they didn't cut down when they built Willow Creek Estate. So what happened to your farm? I asked, examining her face closely. Michael Thompson's father happened. Eleanor's voice toughened. He was a smooth-talking developer who promised the world. Said our farm would be the crown jewel of their new community. Sworn they'd maintain the agricultural character of the land. She opened her folder and ripped out yellowed papers in plastic sleeves. They made us sign the special covenant as part of the contract. Read correctly here, paragraph 3. I squinted at the faded legal language. Agriculture pursuits are to be designated as historic land usage and shall not be hampered by any current or future HOA laws. My jaw dropped. This is still legally binding, you bet it is, Eleanor said with fierce pride. Filed with the county, notarized. Ironclad. When we sold they tried to bury it. Michael's father came to my house after my spouse died, offering money to amend the agreement. I played dumb and kept my copy safe. Does Diane know about this? I questioned, my mind racing with potential. Yes, she knows. The Thompsons have spent years trying to remove this covenant they've already erected on 3 chews of the protected land. Your farm is the last component they need. As we turned to head back, I froze. Diane stood on my property with 3 males in polo shirts holding surveying equipment. Metal pegs with brilliant orange flags dotted my vegetable garden. What are you doing on my land? I demanded, hurrying toward them. Diane's grin was sickening. Lovely, simply noting the community pathways. The board approved construction on Monday. You can't do this, I told. You have got no legal right. We have Every right Diane blasted back. Your persistent breaches have triggered Clause 8.4 of the rules authorizing HOA alteration of non-compliant properties. Eleanor stepped forward, her slender frame abruptly commanding she knows about the original covenant. Diane's grin disappeared. That old item, it was superseded years ago. No, it wasn't, Eleanor replied calmly, patting her folder. I saved the notarized original, with the county seal never legally replaced or removed, still binding on every inch of this land. The men with surveying equipment traded awkward glances. What's she talking about? One question Diane before Diane could respond. Her phone rang, her face twisted with disgust as she answered. This isn't a good moment. Her expression changed fast from annoyance to shock. What do you mean we have no produce for tonight? Summon our backup source. Her voice rose. What do you mean they can't provide either? I smiled as comprehension dawned. Difficulty with your restaurant, Diane. Her gaze narrowed as she recognized the connection. You did this on purpose. I merely paused deliveries to evaluate my client contracts. I spoke innocently, humorous. How your husband's famed Harvest Table restaurant relies on my eyesore farm for its award-winning menu. Diane's phone buzzed again. She stared at it, her face paling. 52 bookings tonight, she murmured. I wonder how those lovely Willow Creek residents will feel when they learn who's truly been feeding them all. Second time, I asked, watching her squirm. What would Diane choose, her crusade against my farm or her husband's business reputation? Look who's suddenly everyone's favorite farmer. Eleanor chuckled 3 days later as we watched another luxury SUV drive into my home driveway. The driver, a woman in designer yoga clothes who had previously wrinkled her nose at my fowl, presently grinned while holding out a handmade pie. I just wanted to thank you for those amazing heirloom tomatoes in Greenleaf Market, she gushed. I had no idea they came from here. My kids are wanting to learn how you grow them. Word had burst through Willow Creek Estates regarding both my farm supplying their food and Eleanor's startling revelation concerning the original covenant. My phone buzzed frequently with messages from residents, local media, and even the mayor. Meanwhile, Harvest Table Restaurant was in pandemonium. Their social media was bombarded with complaints regarding menu alterations and cancelled bookings. Sorry, limited menu because 2 supply issues. Read the quickly written sign on their door. Their famous farm totable reputation was disintegrating by the hour. Diane must be having a meltdown, I said. Wave farewell to the yoga lady. Excellent, Eleanor replied with a satisfied smile. Sometimes people need their perfect world disturbed up a bit. The doorbell rang again. Quickly as I completed feeding my birds, I opened it to find Michael Thompson himself standing there, looking nothing like the confident developer who frequently zipped through the neighborhood in his luxurious automobile. His neatly groomed hair was unkempt, his designer shirt crumpled. May I come in, he inquired, his voice unnaturally meek. I let him into my kitchen but remained standing. If you're here regarding Diane's ludicrous HO infractions, I'm here about our restaurant, he interrupted, scratching his temples, and to apologize for my wife's enthusiasm. Enthusiasm? Is that what you call trying to take my property and pestering me daily? I crossed my arms. Michael sank onto a chair without asking glance. Diane gets carried away with her vision for the community. She's enthusiastic about keeping property values high by turning my private farm into a petting zoo without my consent. He winced. That was poorly executed, yet I'm here to make things right. He drew out a shiny folder with community partnership imprinted on the cover. I have a business concept that solves everyone's issues. I lifted an eyebrow but said nothing. We need your produce desperately, he stated. Our chef is threatening to cease, but you need protection from ongoing HO conflicts. What if we formalized a friendship? He spread papers over my table showing nicely created logos and marketing materials. We make the Willow Creek Farm Collective. You maintain full ownership and control of your property, but we market it appropriately as a community asset. Residents can subscribe to weekly produced boxes. The restaurant gets priority supply. Everyone wins. The premise wasn't horrible, and the HO harassment stopped immediately. Totally. Michael nodded enthusiastically. We'll remove those awful signs today. Diane has decided to stand back from this subject altogether. That seemed too easy. Wherefore the sudden change of heart? Michael grin tightened. Let's just say the restaurant means a lot to us, and the covenant Eleanor found has complicated our plans. After Michael left promising to send the final agreement tomorrow, Eleanor called. Almost quickly did I just see Michael Thompson leaving your residence. I told her about his proposal be extremely wary. She advised 30 years I've known that family, they've never given up. Anything they wished, read every word of everything they send you. Better yet, have a lawyer read it. The Thompsons don't make deals, they place traps. I couldn't sleep all night turning over Michigan offer in my mind. Around 2 a.m. I heard strange noises outside. Grabbing my flashlight, I rushed out to discover my chicken coop's gate wide open and wire cutters on the ground. My 20 hens had escaped and were dispersed throughout the neighborhood. Over the next hour I chased hens through perfectly maintained yards, sorry to awaken neighbors as my birds ruined flower beds and left droppings on patios. Precisely the kind of incident Diane needs. I muttered, finally capturing my final hen. As I turned to head home, I caught a glimpse of someone watching from behind a nearby hedge, a familiar form in designer outfits. Fading away into the darkness, I clutched the wire cutters I'd found. Now noticed the monogram DT on the handle. My blood boiled as I recognized this wasn't over, it was simply shifting strategies. What else were the Thompsons planned? And how far would they go to get my land? I gazed at the contract Michael had left, my hands shaking with anger. Right there, in tiny type on page 6, Grantaire agrees to transfer developing rights of 60% of property to Willow Creek HOA. After 24 months they weren't offering cooperation. They were trying to seize my land legally. Who attempts to hide something so essential in tiny